we're starting with Mazinga Part 3. So, this is the end render from the video. Basically, he gets a pose, eyes closed, he jumps and teleports. As you can see, it didn't come out exactly as I wanted, so I'll be retuning it again. But for a rough animation, I guess this is the start. But let's see how it got to this point. So I start out, of course, putting in a new camera, going back to its default pose, switching to the new camera by selecting it and pressing Control and numpad 0 to assign that camera to be the active camera. Of course, delete all my previous nodes and start over from the beginning. Still not pleased with the reflections that are showing on the model, but I've become kind of used to them being there. I think they add a little character. I'll tune them at a later time, but for now I'll just leave the materials the way they are. So to begin animating, first I bring down a timeline and then select the bones that I want to lock into this position on the first frame. And just press G to set a keyframe there, jump over a couple of frames, set the end frames with E over the timeline by putting the slider over on the last frame and pressing E, and also press S over the timeline to set the start frame if you want to set it to a different range. Still trying to find a good pose. Alright, and usually whenever it comes to animation, what I like to do is block in the poses, then from there go into the dope sheet, offset the timing, as well as set down breakdowns to do the initial blocking, and then from there to go into the curve editor and adjust the interpolation between each of the keyframes to even further set the velocity. In this video, I just do it just keyframing. I just wanted to make something simple. I was planning on actually moving on to the next blend that I wanted to focus on in this video, but I figured I might as well give them some sort of animation and just finish this one out. Now, by the time that you see him jump up forward at the last frame, he's supposed to be completely disappeared, or at least that's what I was thinking. I was going for more of an anime style teleport where basically he would jump up and just break apart into a series of lines and then fade out really fast. But in the final render I found that since I had messed with the dope sheet to try to extend the animation to take place over a longer series of frames, it had caused it to actually have kind of a delayed reaction, especially with all the fine tuning I had done towards the compositing. You'll see near the end, because I stretched it out, it doesn't work out exactly as I want, but it still was a good time lapse, I thought. There, I kind of realized maybe I shouldn't have his head tilted to the side like he's Stone Cold Steve Austin. His left leg bowed in a little bit, gotta find the knee and move that back out. Right here I'm trying to figure out a way to have him go from his default pose to the beginning pose I had in the animation, but it appears that there's too much distance to cover. So I try to give him his default pose, but give him the feet position of the original and just try to set up some keyframes of him kind of going between those poses. I'm sure if I would have spent more time tuning the animation, it would have came out a lot better. So I may revisit this at a later time, but I'm sure you get the idea. The dope sheet is for offsetting the timing. The timeline on the right is for just going to each frame and setting up keyframes. Now on to compositing. So I set up one layer to be just the ground, and then one layer to be just the robot himself. That way I can control the amount of robot that's alphaed over the background as a way to make them fade out and fade in. So you'll see me go through one way of trying to do it by using a Veroni noise texture and compositor, and I thought it made things a little bit slow, as well as not provide me enough control over raising its intensity over a period of time. So you'll see me try a couple of things, get rid of it, try it again. But composing is definitely one of my favorite parts of blending files. whenever you see just the black and white in the background, that of course is the mask. So whenever it comes to multiplying, screening, adding, and all that stuff, the way I kind of look at it in my head is color psychology. If you take that black and white background, multiply it against the noise background, you will have just the background and the noise, like so. So where it's black, it's going to replace with the background. Where it's white, it's going to replace the object. So we see it looking noisy here and breaking apart. And now we see it fading in and fading out. And that was the initial goal. However, I realized that once I pulled it down past a certain range, that the values became a little extreme and thus kind of ruined the idea of it. I also thought it looked a little rough in the view. I guess because of the jaggies and the rough pixels you see there. So now I'm trying to think of a way to give a glow to the pieces from the outside, not so much blurring it all, but just blurring the white and then overlaying it to give it a type of glow look. And of course, to make that glow, my favorite way is to just blur it, add it, blur it again, add it, and then of course add the original over all of the blurs to just give it a glow, just like you're seeing there. But that definitely doesn't look as good either. Even if I fade it out, change it to screen, looks a little better right there, but the result I'm wanting is definitely not that. Now, in retrospect, I'm pretty sure that if I would have taken the Z-Pass and involved that in this play, as far as the intensity going over the Z, using the Z intensity to control the intensity of the Verona texture, I'm sure it would have got better results. Now, right here, I noticed that the file output node had received a lot of additional features, so I was hoping that I would be able to just render out some EXRs containing all the passes, so that way I'd be able to load all the frames and do more intensive compositing without having to do it all at the same time as I'm rendering. But I could go ahead and speed this up because this part doesn't work out. I'll need to go back and maybe read the wiki about this again to see if I understood it correct. So I'm trying to set up directories. Like I said, this part isn't going to work. I tried duplicating it, realized that these two nodes I have to basically make the second node all over again because this one still is not able to be changed over here. What is this? I can only move them up. Go ahead and just delete that, make another one. So right here I'm opening a new file to bring in the EXR I made just to test it. First time I bring it in, it crashes. Okay. Go into it again. And what happens here? For a split second it showed me the background of it showed me the actual render, but suddenly it replaced the image with the alpha. So I wasn't sure exactly what was going on here, but I just decided to abandon it altogether. I also opened Mazinga again, and it crashed my display driver. And Blender started crashing again, so I just close out of it, go back into it, delete these two outputs immediately because they may be killing the program. I guess I take a moment before I delete those two file outputs, but I end up scrapping them in the end. So I bring in a wood texture now because I realized that I could probably just use the color ramp to increase the blacks and make them hard on the edges and get those lines I was wanting. And at this point, I also decided to use a split viewer to show half of my compositing at one stage and the effects that it has on it at another stage. So it's showing just the robot being modified. Then it shows the final render with it all being done. And these are useful to for comparing your effects at the same time that you're setting them up. So, as you can see, by multiplying my wood texture against the object index of the robot's body, I'm able to turn his alpha into just lines in the shape of him, and then blurring it out allows me to control exactly how much of him is visible. Now, the next thing from here is a system for controlling exactly when this effect is going to be applied and when it's not. So that's where the switch node comes in. Now the switch node, as you can see up there, all it does is switch between two separate outputs. So this is one that I have been wanting for a long time. My old way of doing things was going between two separate mix nodes and just setting keyframes for the factor to go from 0 to 1. So the switch node is definitely a welcome addition to Blender. I believe it was something I discovered actually, or something I discovered probably like a month ago after noticing that there hadn't been such a feature implemented. So it's definitely a welcome addition. In addition to making him fade out into lines over a period of time, preferably when he's jumping, I also go over making his eyes glow using just a compositor and raising the intensity and all of that. Like, you'll see me use the switch for a part of the effect, and then you'll see me use keyframes for the screen and add nodes to do the glow. So it's both tricks done at two different aspects. Sometimes I worry if I'm going to be one of those, old men about Blender someday. Like, back in my day, I didn't have the tile compositor. We just have to wait 30 seconds for it to update on the screen. Because like I mentioned in the last video, the compositor now is definitely a lot faster than what it used to be. Enough that new users are probably spoiled by the setup that's going on with it now. But the way it used to be was almost unacceptable, but I still enjoyed it. Because sometimes it would work fairly fast, but get a couple of nodes on the screen and it would just start sputtering. So any opportunity I have to go in and try out the new compositor setup that uses the OpenCL, I by no means will pass up the opportunity to do so. The final thing I did here was add the glow for the eyes. So of course I take the object index, try to smooth it, start out blurring it, blur it again, this time with 10. Add an RGB curve, raise the intensity, might even blur it one more time. Now it's to add it, so I just add the blurriest blur with the less blurred, and then overlay that with the original unblurred smooth mask to begin with, and so that gives me a nice little glow. However, it looks a little rough. Stick a soften in the mix, and that softens up the eyes quite a bit. Give it a name. Don't know what to name the input. Still don't know what to name it. Now we have this nice little glow group that will do some work for us. And I'm going to use that glow as just a factor in modifying the original image. That way my RGB curves only affects the eyes. And I can even make it red or blue or change colors, but I decided not to do any of that. In addition to that, I also screen that same mask that I created over the original image to add even more to it, and of course go with the switch. So now I can switch his eyes from glowing to not glowing, and now I have the 3D view up on the side, so I can choose at what point in the animation I want the switch to be on and off. So my goal was that he'd bend down, look away, look back, his eyes would be glowing, he'd jump up, his eyes would begin glowing, more profusely, and then he would just fade away. So, just make a cool little animation. So I might be revisiting this again, since I wasn't pleased with the animation quality itself the first time. I know I can do a lot better on it. But this video was still one I liked quite a bit. It was fun to make this one. So I figured Mazinga was worth another shot. And so that concludes it. So, happy blundering.